Hey everyone. I'm here to talk about the evolution of dark launching on SnapCI, which is the product that I work on. And when I first heard the term, I kind of expected that, a ninja in the dark, like releasing features stealthily into the public. I didn't really know what it meant, and then about 3 years later, here I am talking to you folks about that. My name is Badri. Hi again. I work at ThoughtWorks, and I work on our hosted continuous integration, continuous delivery platform, SnapCI. That's the URL right there. I am a developer, although there's going to be a suspiciously small amount of code in this talk. I can prove my credentials later. That's my Twitter handle, and that's my GitHub profile. What's Snap? So it would be interesting to just give a really quick rundown on what Snap is and what we do, because that might give you a sense for what were the things that we needed to plan for when we were releasing and to talk about our life cycle. So Snap is a hosted continuous delivery tool. So if you're familiar with continuous integration as a practice, there are plenty of hosted continuous integration tools. There is CodeShip, CircleCI, Travis, rather famously. We fall into that same category of tools, but we support continuous delivery by providing people full deployment platform for doing deployment pipelines. We support these following languages and platforms, but really the interesting thing about this, and the reason why this is important, is one of the things that continuously hinders us, or is an interesting thing for us to overcome, is the fact that people's builds are constantly running on our systems, and we are effectively their gateway into production. So releasing features, releasing untested features, instability of any sort is not just a case of your tests don't run. There are people that literally have to get in touch with us every now and then when a bug does get into production, saying, I am unable to deploy, you need to fix this bug right now because my pipeline will not go through to production without that. So it gets a little intense at times, and that's the sort of stuff that we try to avoid by releasing features with feature toggles, and I want to talk a little bit about how we do that today. So one of the features that we released very, very recently was we went through a huge, big replatforming exercise. Snap was started about 3 years ago. And as you can imagine, the world of VPS and the technology that you use to build those servers and platforms based on VPSs has changed quite dramatically. The technology landscape has changed quite dramatically in the past. Snap was originally based on the containerization technology called OpenVZ, which has been battle tested for a really long time. And then relatively recently, we moved to a completely new stack, which is based on LXC and supports running Docker builds on your Snap pipeline. So that is a massive replatforming effort, and essentially builds that used to run on the old platform may or may not run on the new platform. The new platform is based on Ubuntu, the old platform was based on CentOS. So the old platform was geared towards a very different sort of demographic, and the new platform is once again targeting a very different demographic. So we needed to do this migration where we had to move users over from the old platform to the new platform while keeping both of them running at different points in time and continuing to get feedback and evolving both of them at the same time, and we used some of the techniques that I'll be talking about in order to actually do this. So to give a little bit of a flavor for where we are today, it's always helpful to remember where we came from. The one thing that we like to do, so a lot of people do know about ThoughtWorks because we talk about development practices and a lot of cutting-edge technologies. There are people that talk about microservices all the time at ThoughtWorks. There are people that talk about serverless architectures all the time at ThoughtWorks, and so because of that, there is this tendency for people to think that that is always the first thing that you start out with. That if you're going to start out a brand new project today, you're going to start it out completely with microservices, or you're going to completely start it out serverless, and that's not really the case. And what I hope to show during the course of this is how you can start out doing things really small and really simple, and then hopefully evolve that over the period of a few years as your needs actually dictate the kind of technology solutions and choices that you make. So, as I was saying, back in 2013, We started out as a proof of concept. Snap was, it was really not even a tool. We would barely stay up for more than 20 minutes in a row. It was hard to get the tool to actually listen to GitHub commits consistently, provision containers, and run people's builds in a predictable manner. Now, when we were in such a proof of concept stage where there was literally 2 people who were really, really interested in it and wanted to get it working, it did not really make sense for us to really think about things like feature toggles. We did not start building the project on day one saying every commit is going to go out or every feature is going to be released with a feature toggle. In fact, all we had was a single environment. Every commit and every push would go right through to production, because at that point, all that Snap was a proof of concept. It was just a glint in somebody's eye. We didn't know if it had any legs. And that was our smoke testing environment, and it was a POC phase, and it lasted for just over a few months. We literally had 0 users, and we had 1 environment, which is arguably 1 environment too many when you have that many users. And every code push effectively became a deployment and a release. Now, moving forward a few months to 2014, we finally got our stability issues sorted. One of the core stability issues that we had was, of course, to do with the fact that OpenVZ runs on a patched kernel, and so we needed to make sure that we could get that up and running stably. And once we got that running, we started releasing features at a slightly more regular cadence. But you must remember, at this point, we're still in a closed beta. Snap was not released to the public yet. It was invitation only as a product, and we were still looking at a handful of users. So at this point, we still had our smoke environment where all our changes would go. So for those who are not familiar with a deployment pipeline, who here has heard the term deployment pipeline? Right, great, fantastic. So that then represents our deployment pipeline from the point where we make a commit all the way through our testing and our deployment phases right through an environment. And each commit over here results in a new version of the app getting deployed to a particular environment. Now, we continue to have the smoke environment where all our features would get tested and every single code commit would go through. We have a bunch of smoke tests that run against that environment, but clearly not every commit or every code push results in a complete feature that can be released to your users. And at this point in time, we had still not explored the full potential of feature toggles, because we were still developing the platform. We were still developing the basic features. All users were working towards exactly the same goal. There weren't exactly like 3 people working on 3 different things at any point in time. There was just 1 person working on infrastructure and stability, and 1 person working on the basic feature, and 1 pair. And we were about 4 or 5 people working on this. So as and when features got built out, we'd reach a point where the feature was good for release, and we'd take that commit and we'd push it into a release branch, and every commit onto the release branch would get deployed to a prod environment. And that was the extent of what we were doing at that point in time. So our idea of releasing to a subset of the audience was quite literally pick and choose which commits you wanted to get deployed and take it from there. So once again, this is where we were in a closed beta. Our users were handpicked. These were people that had said, we wanted to try out your tool. They had signed up for it, and so they knew they were signing up for a beta tool. This is important because if they knew they were signing up for a beta tool, their expectations are set appropriately, and they understand that we are still in the process of development. And as I will reflect on towards the end of this talk, a lot of what we try to do through our use of feature toggles and dark launching is to make sure that the application user experience maps onto user expectations. So people that are handpicked and know that they're signing up for a beta tool have a completely different set of user expectations of what the tool will do than people that might be actually paying for your tool and using it actively on a daily basis. So we have 2 environments, as I mentioned, a smoke and a production environment. And we select what to deploy. It was possible because there are very few features. It's a small team. People are sitting around a table. Somebody just pipes up and asks, can I push this through to production? And that's good enough for the most part. At this point in time, we did have some kinds of feature toggles, but these specifically are not release toggles. So we had some sort of permission toggles, and we had some ops toggles. So we had the ability to turn on certain features in the application, not necessarily because not necessarily because we wanted only some users to experience it, but quite literally, we got some users in at a very, very early stage, and there were things that they wanted to do, and there were hoops that they were willing to jump through that we certainly did not think would ever meet our expectation of what the finished feature would look like. So we would hack something together, turn it on via a toggle just for that user, and just enable it literally for them, and that was the equivalent of what we were doing at that point in time. And these were static, because we could actually say, literally only for this user and this repository, enable this feature, and we'd make it completely static in the code base at that time. Going forward another few months, this is where things started getting really interesting. Around 2015, we launched our where we had our payment gateway go out. People started paying for Snap. We had our official release, and this is when people started using it in earnest. This is where it became open to the public. Anybody could come and sign up for it and start building their application and deploying using Snap. At this point, the kind of features we were building were certainly not everybody was working on the same set of features. There were some people who'd be working on getting Java builds and automatic detection for Java builds up and running. There'd be other people working on getting Node.js up and running. There'd be people trying to get RBNV working the same as RVM in our environments. So the kind of features that people were working on started getting a lot more diverse. We weren't all working towards the same goal. It was quite possible that a lot of the commits that were going through the code base at that point in time could be for completely interleaved features, and there was no real way for any one person to actually just pipe up and say, is the app good to go? The second thing that happened at this point in time was the definition of the app also changed. Snap, it consists of, as any significant platform, consists of many different components. It's not just a single monolith that gets deployed. So when you said the app, it also became a question as to which app you're even talking about. So we needed to talk about which component are you talking about, or which version of which component. So keeping all of these things in sync started getting to be a real nightmare, and there was no way just a conversation between two people was going to fix that problem. So we needed to get a little bit more rigorous about what we meant about releasing a new piece of functionality into public. And this is where we really started using feature toggles effectively, release toggles effectively. So if over here on the master of your repository, let's take only one application at this point. If there were two features, the purple feature and the orange feature that were going out at that were going simultaneous development, they would all the commits would of course go through to our smoke environment, and that was fine because the smoke environment was only for us to see if all the features work together. It was quite literally our integration testing environment. But at different points in time, one of the features might be significantly further along and might be in a position to get released. And so we would actually cut releases to actually start deploying that feature. And let's say that this was the last commit that needed to go through for the purple feature to get released. We would want that to be made available to our users as soon as possible. Now, hidden in that statement are a whole bunch of assumptions. Now, why does that have to be released at that point in time? Why do you want to release a feature as soon as it is ready? Why do you want to? So where does that start coming from? Really, as a company that tries to build tool for people to do continuous delivery, it would be remiss of us if we were not capable of releasing our software on a reliable, repeatable cadence to our users as soon as possible. We are still in the process of trying to figure out exactly what users want from the various features that we release. We still want to get our feedback from our users as soon as possible, because the sooner you get feedback, the closer the feedback is to the point where you've actually worked on the feature, the easier it is to iterate and make sure that the feedback that you're getting and the way you can improve on the features that you're building can actually happen in a rapid iterative fashion where users don't have to wait for weeks for things that they want to see happen in your tool. So that is kind of why you do want features that are in the process. While there might be other features getting developed, you want the features that are complete to get released into production as soon as possible. Now, this interleaving of features then makes that just a little bit harder. So at this point in time, We might have a release that consists of only features that only code that's meant for the purple feature going out into our staging environment. We started creating a staging environment where the Snap team were the only users. So we use Snap, we dog food Snap, Snap gets built on Snap, and so effectively our staging environment acts as our gateway to go into prod. Our staging environment allows us to deploy to prod. So if our staging goes down, so if we break the app and we deploy into staging, then that essentially cuts off our own legs in our ability to deploy to prod, which is great, because that way, you're not cutting off your users' legs before you cut your own off. That's one thing that we put into place. So that was one way we could make sure that bad stuff never really quite got into production. But you always need multiple checks. So while we would actually keep our various feature toggles turned on in staging so that we could test and examine how they worked, for production, it was a slightly more discretionary process. Basically, the product manager, which at that point of time was me, and is now Susie, we would actually go in, and when the product manager felt it was appropriate, and when we actually started getting a little bit of traction around what we wanted to do, or worked with the marketing team to talk about the feature, to talk to our users, announcing that something new is coming out, we would then be able to toggle the feature on so that the same code, which is currently there on production, could just have the new feature enabled on it. This reduces the possibility that in order to release a piece of functionality to your users, you have to release an entirely new version of your software, because that just increases the likelihood that what you're deploying next is going to contain some bugs that you haven't actually accounted for. So by using toggles, release toggles over here, it allowed us to separate out when we wanted to release these features out to our users, so that while staging and smoke could continue to give us all the feedback that we wanted about making sure that bad code did not get pushed out to production, we still stood in control of when a feature was actually exposed to our users, so that the product manager could handle the user expectations at that point in time. And that's a recurring theme, which is handling user expectations. So just to recap, we were open to the public. We had multiple environments with our earlier environments, which had the Snap team themselves as the users, acting as gateways to our later production environments, so that we did not accidentally end up deploying bad code to prod. We had release toggled features. And at this point in time, we were doing effectively what I call quantitative user management. So what I mean by that is, so let's take a look at a typical development schedule. Let's say you've got a bunch of features going on at the same point in time. Let's say you've got the purple feature starting on Monday, ending roughly on Friday afternoon, and then because you're doing continuous delivery and your code base is tested, so you have no problem deploying on a Friday afternoon as you're having a beer. So you deploy that, and you have another feature. You have this orange feature, which is actually currently in development, which is going to take a fair bit longer, but you can actually do that because of what we just talked about. You've got the toggles, you can deliver features that are halfway, you can deliver code that contains half-implemented features without releasing half-implemented features to your users. So under this sort of a development schedule, your deployments kind of start stacking up like this. So in your staging environment, let's say you've got your purple feature going out, and you've released the code for your orange feature, but you haven't toggled it on in staging yet. And at some point in time, you might choose to turn that on in staging, see how it behaves, and that same code might actually, the previous code, well, a code from somewhere beyond here, might just reach production. Because one of the benefits of a deployment pipeline is you can go in there today and deploy code that got built and tested in another environment yesterday, day before, 3 days ago. So staging typically lags behind production by a small bit. So we've got that going, and we can now turn these features on. So you'll see that features get turned on in staging before they get turned on in production, and production kind of lags behind. The difference being the number of users you've got in staging and the number of users you've got in production are wildly different. But the important thing is, while you're getting feedback from different sets of users, and the amount of feedback and the kind of users you're getting feedback from is different, everybody sees a feature in full at this point in time. So there is no partial implementation of a feature, and in fact, that was our goal. What we did not want to do was release partially implemented features to Joe Public, because we did not want to accidentally hobble them with things that were half finished and half implemented. But coming to the feature that we were just working on, the replatforming, it's not really quite a feature. It would be unfair to call it a feature. To our external users, it looks like we just released a whole bunch of features, that we released the ability to run your builds on Ubuntu, and we released the ability to have Docker support. But it was effectively almost a year's worth of work that went into basically recreating from scratch our entire platform and putting that out there into public. Now, clearly, you can't do a year's worth of work, release it all to your users in one large chunk, and somehow think that everything is going to be fine, because I mean, that is pretty much the definition of waterfall delivery if you're going to take a year to deliver any feature. So now you're in an interesting sort of a conundrum. You do not want to release half-finished features to everybody, but you do want to get feedback early and often, even as you're building out your new platform. And we certainly wanted to do that. If we wanted to make sure that we were on the right track, and we wanted to be able to take some set of users, let's say, take some friendly faces, people that had been using the tool for a really long time. You must remember that at this point, we had been in production for few months. There were customers who'd been paying us for 8 to 12 months. We could take some of those people that had been having a successful experience on Snap, and people that had requested some of the new features that were coming out on the new platform, and start releasing to them. So this is in production. So these users are using Snap in the prod environment, but they are the friendly faces, and we get to choose which users to actually release even the half-finished features to. So this basically turns out to be a completely different set of feature toggles and at a completely different level. And it's quite different from what some people do for A/B testing, where any 10% of the users that come to your site might get a new version of the feature. And that is really done for an experimental purpose, so that you can get statistically significant results, saying, if I were to release this feature to 10% of the public, what kind of data can I gather from that? This is slightly different. This is to get feedback from people at an early stage of development, just to find out that you're not on completely the wrong track. And in fact, a few months ago, was it January, Susie, that, or no, it was probably closer to February or March, that we started releasing stuff to the early adopters on our preview environment. Oh, it was the end of last year, so I was right. Okay, so yeah, we started releasing stuff to our early adopters in the preview environment just a little bit before we actually released the new platform, the Sibley platform, to everybody at large. And we're almost at that point. I think I finished literally the very last feature that prevented builds from getting hung in that environment yesterday. And so at the end of the cycle, you're able to release the feature to everybody. But during the course of development, different people have had access to the feature or the functionality at different points in time. Sometimes on completely different environments, sometimes on the production environment, but getting a completely different set of features, and then eventually the entire audience. This is a very different sort of thing, because it's not just quantitative user management. You're actually trying to get a very qualitatively different set of user. You're trying to match a very different set of expectations, because some of these early users, you literally had to handhold them through their experience of using the tool, because you were certainly not going to invest development effort into documentation and telling people how to use the new features at that point in time. So the kind of user management, user expectation setting that you need to do at this point in time is very different than what you do at this point in time, because over here, by now, hopefully, you've got your documentation ready, you've got your support team is ready to support the builds that are going to get built on this platform. So there's a whole load of people that need to come together, and you're not ready to start investing all that effort at this point of time in the life cycle. But you still want to get feedback from these users to make sure that you're going on the right track. So the way we implemented this was by having per user level feature overrides. So we had, of course, the ability to do release level feature toggles that allowed us to enable a feature completely for all users in production. What we wanted to do for this functionality was release it to a subset of users, release it to a small set of known users, identified users that we knew by name, so that we could go into an admin application and set that user's permissions. This is actually a subset of a smaller page where we can provide a whole set of overrides for that user. And but over here, what we used to refer to as container OS is now what we call our different stacks, things that have the two different names. And on a per user basis, you can override this user to have the container OS, the ability to select which operating system they're going to run their builds on. If this feature was disabled, that user would not have the ability to select the brand new platform as their deployment platform as their build and deployment platform of choice. And for users that had this, they had the option to enable that. They weren't necessarily using it. So this was giving the users the ability to make that choice, and this was not necessarily forcing them to use that new platform. So it's, once again, subtly different in that it was about giving users the choice rather than necessarily forcing users onto the new platform or forcing users' builds onto the new platform without talking to them. So a very different sort of experience where we enabled it on a per user basis. And that then brings us to where we are today, which is to just reflect back on all that I've been talking about. Primarily, the fact is, all of this was done because we see ourselves as one of our primary roles is to be, this is of course reflecting on the fact that for 3 years I was the product manager. We are essentially curators of the user experience. There is nobody else who's making sure that the user experience that a user has on your tool is exactly what you expect it to be. We must match the expectation that a user has at any point in time. And at different points of time in your application's lifecycle, different users will have different expectations of what your tool is going to do for them. And the reason we really want to be able to, the reason this can sometimes be in opposition to delivering software on a regular cadence is, of course, the easiest way to make sure that users have a static experience is to have a static application, an application that never changes. Now, clearly, that's also the most ruinous way to run a business. So you do want to have the ability to continually deploy and make changes and listen to your users' feedback. So collecting feedback is still something that you really want to do on a regular basis and listen to your users. So in order to do that, we needed to decouple deployment from releasing, and this is still a common enough misconception in a lot of people's minds where the act of releasing software or taking a bunch of program code that does something and releasing it to an environment is seen as some sort of a monolithic activity without any shades to it. And there needs to be an understanding that deploying code to an environment is very different from releasing a feature to your users. And there are different flavors of releasing features to your users. And the real reason why you would release something is actually to match that user experience, and that is if only if you're sure that you can curate that experience in a way that matches what that user expects of your software at that point in time. And we release early and often in order to get feedback so that we can be prepared to, and that feedback might very well inform how we change our process for building further features and releasing them. And fundamentally, we found that there wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution. At different points of time between 2013, 2014, and 2015, we've needed completely different ways to handle our software release process to our different users, and we needed to take into account quantitative user segmentation, where we were releasing features to a small segment of users, but everybody got the feature either in full or not at all, from a very qualitative sort of hand-holding users through partially built features and trying to get feedback through that process in the same environment, because that's the best indicator of whether something's going to work for users in reality or not. The other thing that we found is if you end up creating a completely separate environment, let's say you create a beta testing environment and ask your users to use your beta testing environment, that actually sets you up for failure from collecting this feedback perspective, because the minute people think it's beta software, they constrain themselves on the feedback they give, they self-censor their own actions. They're not going to put critical things on there, because the minute they put critical things on something they consider beta, they're worried if it's going to go down. And so if you're not running real builds on the real environment, you're not collecting real feedback, especially for the kind of tool we are. And so that's why I mentioned the kind of tool we are right at the start. We stand as gateways to production for a lot of people. And the only way we were going to get real feedback on whether that was actually working for people was if they felt comfortable enough that we were releasing a feature into production and we were there to support them through the process of actually building and releasing that software. So that's kind of what I mean by this sort of qualitative user segmentation. You need to think about your users in a qualitative way and not just as a statistic. And while that can be useful for a very different set of purpose, for a different set of reasons, you might want to release something to a small segment of your audience, but you don't really care who they are, and you're trying to collect data and feedback from that. This sort of thing that we had to do over the past few months was significantly different, and I thought it was worth talking about. Thanks.